So these are the 4 money traps to avoid in 2022.
I was hired to trap them.
I've had traps set for me before now.
Booby traps?
Oh, yes.
The number 1 money trap that people fall in is trying to get rich quick. And there's a good analogy, the longest way around is the shortest way home. So if you're trying to take shortcuts, if you're trying to go the direct approach, you're going to meet more resistance. You're going to put yourself in a position you don't necessarily want to be in. So there's a good analogy in military strategy. World War I, what they did, dug a whole lot of trenches, went directly. Whereas if you go the indirect approach, instead of going directly at the forces, you try to flank them. Instead of trying to get mass and trying to get numbers, you actually strategically work your way around. And where that relates to investment is you'll see quite a strong correlation between risk and return. So people will be walking around, they'll be like, I just seen this 20% return. This is the best opportunity for me to make a whole lot of money. But then you talk to them a few years later and then they end up in a position where they lost it all. A good example with the finance companies in 2008, 2009, where a lot of people were frustrated with the returns they were getting at the bank. They try to go elsewhere to get that greedy higher return, but then the underlying investments were actually very poor. They were using money from the client to put it into developers. Those developments failed and a whole lot of people lost money. So just be mindful that there is a strong correlation between risk and return. And if it's too good to be true, it probably is. Second, money trap, changing your income, not your behavior. So a lot of common narratives that I hear from people is like, if I only had more of an income, then I could save more. And there is some truth. There is a baseline level of income that you need to be able to achieve the lifestyle that you want and be able to save. But it's actually more behavioral. We've had clients come in, they're earning $500,000 between 2 of them, they save nothing. And that narrative is true. And you think, okay, I'm going to get a pay raise, then I'm going to start saving more. But if you don't actually set up the right behaviors to start sequentially taking out money, irrespective of what you earn, you're going to start spending to your lifestyle. Or Parkinson's law, same concept with work. If you give people a criteria and a timeline to achieve certain objectives, then they usually work to that timeline. If you have no timeline, kind of like life, if you didn't have a deadline, how much would you get done? So there is some benefit that you're going to pass away at some point. But that's a bit dark. But that's number 2. So change your behavior, not your income. Sure, increase your income, increase your student mentality, your knowledge. You're the most valuable asset there is, so improve that asset. But make sure you change the habit, not the income, if you're going to save. So, number 3, money trap is being overly optimistic. So, you might have historically looked at the performance of your KiwiSaver, think it's going to keep going that way, using that to plan your retirement, then suddenly, boom, market correction, it doesn't achieve the objectives you want. The other thing is you don't have an emergency fund. Okay, you got an income. Okay, you're investing money you don't have to sort of get ahead in life. But then when there's a market correction, you could put yourself in a position where you're not able to service debt, you're not able to fund your lifestyle, and you might not have expected it, but it's an eventuality. Like if the world had no chaos, it'd be a very simplistic way. But even just thermodynamics, the law of thermodynamics is chaos creates chaos. Like you can't even contain the universe, so how are you going to contain what's going to happen in your life? Everyone you love will die. At some point you're going to have a health issue. At some point you're probably going to have an issue with your job. You're going to have a dispute with your partner. It might not necessarily be a breakup, but it's not going to be pretty. You're not going to feel comfortable. You're going to need a bit of money. So how you can protect yourself, enduring powers of attorney, making sure that you've got someone there who can make decisions for you if something happens. Wills, making sure you got it in a tight little bow. My business associate calls it leaving a grenade under the body. When people pick it up and try and deal with your estate, everyone gets hurt. The other thing is you can look at family trust to protect against creditors, and insurance, income, life, medical insurance, and maybe trauma are usually a good idea for most people. Unless you don't have dependents, then the life insurance is not so important, but income and medical becomes very important. So money trap number 3. Well, that was number 3, wasn't it? Well, this is money trap number 4. Having all your ducks in a row. So many people I come across are waiting for the perfect moment to start living their life. They're waiting to have, enough income to pursue their dreams. They're waiting to have the skill set to get started. But the reality is any successful person you've ever come across in your entire life didn't have it all worked out, didn't have all the answers, wasn't necessarily perfectly confident, had some doubts, had some challenges, but they worked through it on the way. So it's not necessarily about having it all worked out, It's about getting a clear picture on what you want, starting small so you have less resistance emotionally. If you have a small little task that's working in the direction of what you're hoping to achieve, you're not necessarily going to get in a position where you're going to have a lot of resistance. It's the theory of homeostasis, where the rate of change is equal to the rate of resistance. So if you change something in a living system drastically, like pressure, the chemicals will actually occupy less space to adapt to that change. Same thing if you have a drastic change in a social setting. If you suddenly quit drinking and it's rapid and it's unexpected, you're likely to get a lot of resistance. Even an example where it's a bit dark, let's say you had a father that was alcoholic and violent, suddenly quit alcohol, so now the homeostasis, the status quo needs to be maintained, so maybe the son develops into being a drug dealer or develops into being emotionally volatile, because even though that's not necessarily good for the family unit, they've learnt their measurement of the equilibrium, they try and maintain it, and if you do a drastic change, you have a drastic resistance. So start small, start now, and don't have to wait for all your ducks in a row.